deal and the loss of postal jobs and degradation of mail service, the unions say goes along with privatization. A coalition of 14 Detroit public worker unions, including AFSCME, says an agreement reached with the city offers an opportunity for the unions to provide regular input and guidance to city managers over the next 5 years. The agreement covers 3,500 workers. Full details of the deal haven't yet been released. Public safety unions are not in the coalition. The police and fire unions in Detroit have yet to reach a new deal with the city as Detroit's bankruptcy proceeds in court. Ed McNeil, spokesman for the Coalition of Detroit Unions, says Detroit's emergency manager Kevin Orr is privatizing Detroit public services like garbage collection and water and sewer operations, even though privatization too often proves ineffective. The Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, and the Association of Professional Flight Attendants are in negotiations with the merged American Airlines. Talks will continue for 150 days in an effort to reach agreement on a joint new contract for 24,000 flight attendants. American has announced record profits. A new agreement is expected to be in place by 2015. Meanwhile, AFA-CWA has elected Sarah Nelson as the new president of the union. Deborah Sutor was elected vice president. On Wednesday, the AFL-CIO will project a 90 by 60-foot anti-deportation piece of art onto its building in Washington, D.C. to highlight the deportation crisis impact on immigrant workers. The projection will contain the names and stories of deported immigrant workers. The AFL-CIO supports comprehensive immigration reform with a path to citizenship and an end to the deportations that rip apart immigrant worker families. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rise on. Oh, and this town is my town. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This town is my town. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here tonight on the big program. I'm going to be talking about voter suppression, voter ID. Oh, the court's not happy. Court's not happy with the conservative roadblock between you and your ballot box. Not thrilled at all. In fact, now you've got a number of states who've said, you know, this is ludicrous. And all of the right-wing messaging and all of the BS that went with it, ludicrous as well. When the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania stipulates that we've never had a case that we can point to, it's never happened. Never. It's never happened where we can identify anywhere in the country where this has happened, where someone came in and said, I'm so-and-so and I'm going to vote, and that the ID would have stopped. They haven't found it. You would think just one case, maybe two, maybe five, but to spend millions and millions of dollars, there had to be something, right? Well, I think Tom Corbett said it best himself. If he can hold the vote down in Philadelphia in 2010, he'd have had a pretty good shot. And I think that speaks volumes. Also going to talk about a new piece of legislation moving its way through the Pennsylvania Senate and possibly over to the House. Going to be tracking people's prescription drugs under the guise of we're just helping to take care of you. We're going to talk to the ACLU to see what their thoughts on it are. Also, another night we're going to talk to port truck drivers from Savannah, Georgia, about their their fight to get respect, dignity, and, well, to be properly classified as employees. And in the third hour, we're going to talk about workers' Memorial Week of Action out in California. They're doing a bunch of things all across the country, a bunch of events going on. But we're going to talk with the executive director of WorkSafe about more than just the actions, about how do we make safer workplaces? How do we make sure that no one dies and people don't get hurt either? So a lot of that. Also going to take your thoughts, your questions, your comments, whatever's on your mind, whatever pops up, says, hey, I'd like to point that out. More than willing. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. Big news, big headline, at least in my world. Colin Powell was right. If we break it, we bought it. The most expensive reconstruction in the history of the country. We have spent more money than we spent during the entire Marshall Plan. $103.3 billion restructuring Afghanistan. That's not Iraq. That's just Afghanistan. $103.3 billion on reconstruction. That's just fixing the stuff that we broke. Yeah, that worked out well. That's worked out really well, hasn't it? Let me see. Marshall Plan actually did. Yeah, that actually worked. The Bush Plan, not so much. And what it's done is it's made us poorer as a working class, as a nation, mostly as a whole, unless you're the CEO of Halliburton or former head of Halliburton like Dick Cheney, unless you're one of the very wealthy military-industrial complex. Everyone else did not do very well. And that gap between those who have and those who do not, like the rest of us, is growing ever wider, but not quite as wide as it is in China. A new report out this week that points out that the income gap between the rich and poor in China has surpassed the U.S. It used to be that we were about even, because they hadn't grown their billionaire class yet. They're capitalist. And I love how they keep saying it's communist China, who follow very capitalistic, very, very capitalist ideals. Evidently, according to this report put out by two professors who I'm not even going to try and butcher their names, from the University of Michigan, they've pointed out that this gap is growing. And they use this Gini coefficient, Gini. It's just a gauge of income gaps, how big it is, and your pain levels, and at what point do you have social unrest. And they claim that you have social unrest about 0.4. So if you're at 0.4, you're at a moment of social unrest. And in China, what they've put the Gini coefficient at is about 0.55. So there is, and we hear the stories all the time, there's unrest there. There are people who are, people are jumping out of stairwells trying to commit suicide. But here in the U.S., you'd be surprised to know 0.45. Now, I'm not surprised to know it's 0.45, which puts us in that range where you could have social unrest. And, oh, wait a second, we do! We've got fast food workers in the streets. We've got port truck drivers in the streets. We've got Walmart workers, and you name it. We've got a low-wage workforce who our mainstream media does not cover. But I look at this, and for me, this Gini coefficient is really important, because it then talks about how strong your economy is. When you have mass inequality, when you have this huge gap between the haves and the have-nots, what you have is a slowing economy, which is why China's economy is slowing, which is why our economy, the news today, slowing, because you don't have people with disposable income. And as one of the economists pointed out, that when you have this kind of income inequality, you're going to have this slow growth because people aren't going to have disposable income. And as this guy pointed out, when the very wealthy have all of this money, what they do with it is they invest it to make more money. And they spend a little bit of it, but not nearly as much as you and me and everybody else who works for a living would spend. The majority of their money goes into investing, into building greater and greater and greater wealth, generational wealth. Not just enough that, hey, I'm going to be able to eat in a month or 2 or 6, or I'm going to be okay for the next year. No, we're talking generational wealth down the road. We're talking, trying to get to that. I'm the next Rockefeller. And I find it interesting that, today, of all days, for this to happen, you look at what our Senate did. Our millionaires in the Senate, all Republicans in this case, and I was corrected on Twitter when I said not surprising that the millionaires in the Senate refused to raise the minimum wage. And then I was corrected, it's the Republicans in the Senate. And this is true. All of the Republicans, well, we've heard this. We've heard this tale time and time again. It comes down to the filibuster. Harry Reid doesn't have a set of stones to say, you know what, you guys are playing this game far too long. It's time. No president has been filibustered as much as this guy. In fact, I don't know that the last 4 presidents have been filibustered as much as Obama has been. Now, the Senate Democrats put forth this idea that we raise the federal minimum wage to $10.10 an hour and increase the tipped minimum wage as well. The idea being we put more money in people's pocket. People have money in their pocket to spend. They do that. And the economy gets moving forward. That's kind of the idea, right? And then maybe we don't have all of the social spending. You look at the stories we've been hearing lately about the fast food industry, the $7 billion in subsidies we give them, the big box retailers that we give billions of dollars to. There's a thought, and one that I subscribe to, that if you pay the workers properly and they make a livable wage, they don't have to go asking for help from the federal government. Now, understand what the right-wing argument in this is. Now, the Democrats say we put more money in workers' pockets because we believe in rewarding work, and then they'll be able to spend more money, it'll help business, and business will continue to grow upward. It'll be a spiraling up. What Republicans, and my Republican friends, listen to this, because this is really, really very important that you understand what the ideology of your party has been. While you're out there bashing people who are getting welfare and food stamps, you're bashing people who get Medicaid, and you're bashing people who need heating assistance, and you're bashing kids who need school lunches, understand what the argument against the minimum wage has turned into. Because they know they can't just put their head in the sand and say, no, 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 no. They know that because, look, the Gini coefficient, they see that too. They know social unrest is in their back door. The billionaire class of our country knows, hey, when that number keeps going up, and it has been, when it gets up and up and up and up, our heads could be on sticks. We have to do something. So the right wing, and this has always been the right wing position, even though they bash it, the right-wing position is, no, we should not raise the minimum wage because that would cost us jobs, even though they can't show where that's actually happened. You've had some number of structural jobs that have gone away, and then employment as a whole grew. So I guess you could say that, those handful of jobs over here that were mechanized because of the minimum wage, the cost of those jobs, but the overall number, because of the mass spending and all that, created more jobs. See, both sides are really very... I'll show you my card only on one side. I'm telling you both sides of it. Some jobs will be lost, but over the whole of it, you will see a growth in jobs because there's more economic activity. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. Now, what the Republicans are saying, I shouldn't even say the Republicans, what the conservative ideologues are saying, what we should do is, no, we shouldn't raise wages. That'll hurt that'll hurt small business, it'll hurt employers, even though small business doesn't. They're generally not the minimum wage employers. What they're saying is we need to look at the earned income tax credit. And I've talked about this before. I'm not against the idea. But what they want to do is they want to up that earned income tax credit and make it a livable wage, make $7.25 a livable wage with subsidies, kind of like we do to corporate America. So it's a very business-centered idea, of which I am not against. My problem with it is when you have Mitt Romney running around going, well, the 47% who don't pay federal taxes, those are who we're talking about. We're talking about the low-wage workforce. We're talking about the fast food workers. We're talking about the big box retail workers. We're talking about the service-based economy workers who clean our hotels and scrub toilets and do all the work that most people don't want to do. But that these folks, they don't have a choice. This is their job. And look, there should be pride in any work and respect in any work. But the reality in this, again, when you look at it, is they can't make ends meet. So the thought is we'll subsidize them, and then we'll beat them up. So, the anti-government people, stop and think about it. You've got we need less intrusive government. We need smaller government. We need no spending. Yet they're also saying what we need to do is we need to subsidize low-wage workers. Does that make any sense to you? I guess it's kind of like, we have minority rights for rich people, but for minorities, no rights. Does that make sense to anybody either? It just kind of leaves me scratching my head. At some point, the conservative ideology has to stop being schizophrenic. And maybe some mental health treatment would be good with that. Maybe in Obamacare, maybe there's some mental health treatment for him. Just my thought. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
This is a fading American dream. I got the time now to glorify now. Before a second time, come on the top floor. I'm just searching for my dignity. This is a fading American dream. This is a fading American dream. This is a fading American dream.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
This Mother's Day, don't settle for the same old box of chocolates. Give Mom a gift she'll really appreciate. A gift that'll truly make a difference. Give her a heart necklace made by women who have survived actual war in South Sudan. These necklaces contain Swarovski crystals and are simply stunning. They come in all different colors and sizes, and best of all, they help fund a great cause. It's what Mom would want. To purchase your gift, visit goatsfortheoldgoat.com and click on Shop. Again, that's goatsfortheoldgoat.com/shop.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania. Done.
Taking care of business every day. Taking care of business every way. I've been taking care of business. It's alright. Taking care of business and working overtime. What else?
And welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So, I'm still focused on, our court said, that they're not going to reinstate the law here in Pennsylvania that Corbett and the Republicans wanted to ram down our throats. And out in Wisconsin, the judge finds that no rational person could be worried about voter fraud in Wisconsin either. So, you see all this, and if you remember, we talked about this when all this was going on, that eventually it's all going to be thrown out, but at what costs? And that's with all the money, all of the resource, and all of the votes that were blocked. That, to me, that's an egregious violation of the trust of the public, and we should be throwing all the bums out. Everybody who voted for it, out. Just my thought. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about this, and we'll go through some other stuff. It's our good friend, attorney Erwin Aronson. Erwin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, good to be here, Rick, and so happy that you're focused on yet another victory we've had in this voter ID battle. And while it does my heart good that we won yesterday again in Pennsylvania, it candidly does my heart even better that a federal court found the Wisconsin iteration of this same effort at voter nullification to be unconstitutional and impermissible, because that is a major deviation from what the federal courts have been doing on this question. And that's very significant. But yesterday's second decision from Judge McGinley, another 30-plus page decision in rejecting Governor Corbett's effort to make and compel the Commonwealth Court to reconsider its very well-considered opinion is very significant, very gratifying, and once again, the labor movement in Pennsylvania was at the forefront of this litigation, and I was honored to be able to represent our team in that fight, and very much touched that we won again in so clear and convincing a fashion.
And now, for me, this should be a huge political issue, and something that the governor should have to stand in front of the voters and say, "I did this. This is why," and I got my wrist. I got smacked.
Well,
and deservedly so.
He needs to explain why, in a democracy, he stood up in his capacity as our governor and begged first to sign a law and later to attempt to defend a law that is aimed at denying people their participation in our democracy. I've said this before on this show, but it can't be said enough. Many, many rights are fundamental. And I understand the fundamental right to free speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of exercise of religion, freedom to bear arms, freedom to be faced and confronted by our accusers in a criminal matter, freedom to have representation by legal counsel, freedom against unlawful searches and seizures. But there's only one right that is not merely fundamental, but is foundational. It is the right on which all other rights are based, and that's our right to vote. And Tom Corbett and Representative Mike Turzai and the 100-odd members of the Pennsylvania General Assembly and the 30 members of the Pennsylvania Senate who voted in favor of this legislation all need to answer why they determined that it was appropriate to strip people who were registered properly to vote under Pennsylvania law of their right to vote, take away this foundational right from people who were qualified to vote in every possible respect, and then for Corbett to spend our taxpayer money to advertise this law.
Even this last election go around, when it was already struck down, they were still spending money on it.
Oh yeah, and to spend money on lawyers and litigation courts when we have people having to make choices. And I've said this before, but I'm going to keep on saying it. We have people today in Pennsylvania who are making choices between medicine and milk, making choices between sugar and shoes. To have their money spent to defend and advocate the continuation of a law that strips them of their right to vote is incomprehensible to me. It's inconceivable. Anybody, I don't care if they're Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, or Communists, anybody who advocates or defends a law that strips people who are qualified to vote, who the law says are qualified to vote, of their right to participate in our democracy must answer for that, and must answer with clarity of purpose, because that is the only thing that separates us from a dictatorship, separates us from a totalitarian state like the former Soviet Union. And these people who claim to be the protectors of freedom, the defenders of the Constitution, are the ones who engaged over and over again in this conduct to strip Pennsylvania citizens who registered to vote, who were qualified to vote. In the case of Ms. Applewhite, who was the lead plaintiff, who, 93 years young, had voted in every election since Franklin Roosevelt's presidency, was being denied her right to vote because at the young age of 93 no longer had a driver's license and had been mugged in an Acme store, and they took her pocketbook, so she no longer had an ID card that was issued by a government agency, and she could only get one if she presented a Social Security card, which she couldn't do because they had stolen her wallet. And this wonderful, responsible, engaged citizen who had, as I said, voted in every single election cycle going back to Franklin Roosevelt's presidency, was being told that she would not be permitted to vote because she couldn't present a Corbett-required ID card.
Oh, I think he during the election in 2010 kind of gave us a clue of why, and he famously said, if you could just keep the vote down in Philadelphia, with the urbans, if you could just keep that down, he'd do okay.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And, we are not talking about Alabama in 1845. We're not talking about Mississippi in 1956. We're talking about Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Erie in 2014, Rick. And the reason behind this is exactly what you said. It's exactly what the governor told us. And we were on notice, and thank goodness the Pennsylvania labor movement and its leadership under the direction of President Rick Bloomingdale of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO, of Secretary-Treasurer Frank Snyder of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO, of President Frank Sirianni of the Pennsylvania Building Trades, of the Executive Council of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO. Thank goodness for them. Thank goodness for the NAACP. Thank goodness for the Voter Education Project. Thank goodness for the American Civil Liberties Union Pennsylvania chapter and their wonderful lawyers, Vic Balzac in particular, who carried this ball and wouldn't back down and wouldn't be intimidated by political leaders and wouldn't be intimidated by the Koch brothers machine and wouldn't be intimidated by the accolades of Paul Weyrich from years ago, who regularly announced how we good guys don't really have an interest in voter participation. Thank goodness for all of these people who got together and had the vision and the wisdom and the courage to stand up to this baloney and to protect this most singularly fundamental of all the rights in a democracy. And I was so proud when I got to be in that courtroom and be on the side of the people and not of the special interests and the multi-rich. Be an advocate for the multitudes instead of the multi-rich is one of those little things that I get to do that makes life just a little bit sweeter and allows me to feel that in some fashion we're advancing the ball and protecting the right interests. This is one of those areas where we have just been blessed with a handful of visionary leaders who get it, who understand it, and who aren't afraid, and who stand up where others would wilt.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Now that this is pretty much a done issue, how do we undo all the damage that's been done? How do we undo the messaging that there are a number of disenfranchised voters who've got it in their heads through billboards on buses and radio and TV and saturation with our tax dollars telling them, hey, if you don't have an ID, you can't vote. How do we undo that damage and go back and say, hey?
Well, first of all, it ain't over yet. The people on the other side of this litigation from us have one more right, and they have a right, and it's unique, they have a right to appeal to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Most cases are not in the original jurisdiction of the Commonwealth Court, and therefore, when the Commonwealth Court has heard the case that originated at a lower court or an administrative agency, and is hearing it on appeal, an appeal to the Supreme Court is discretionary on the part of the court. But this case is one of those narrow band of cases in which the original hearing was heard by the Commonwealth Court. The Commonwealth Court was not acting as an appeals court, it was acting as a trials court. As such, the governor and his minions have an absolute right to appeal to the Supreme Court. And we're going to learn whether or not they're going to try this one more time. So this is not over yet.
Right. And while they're using our tax dollars, I'm sure they will.
Of course. And, particularly in an election year, when this is one of those kinds of things that they can use our money to gin up their political base, this narrow, nihilist, nullification crowd, who are so supportive of them because they really don't think that people of color or people who are in poverty or people who have a Latino last name or people who have an Asian appearance ought to have the same voting rights as those good white folks in the United States, regardless of citizenship. So I suspect that we're going to see them attempting to gin up their base a little bit by appealing this, but I don't know, and I have no insider information. So before we start talking about how we undo what's been done, we need to talk about how we continue to protect what has taken place.
You know, what's interesting to me is they've got the money to do this, but we don't have money for guidance counselors or nurses in schools. It's just
we don't have
it's priorities.
We don't have money to make sure that people have access to health care. We don't have any number of things. We can't protect our water. We can't protect our air, but we can protect those who want to strip us of this foundational right in a democracy. It is troublesome, it is shocking, and for once I'm very pleased and proud to have been on the right side of the angels here.
And I'm glad you were. Let me ask you last area of questioning to move aside from the voter. A minute ago you mentioned our rights against unreasonable searches and seizures, and I'm sure you saw the case, the story that came out today, that basically, as I read it, and you're the expert here, I can be pulled over basically, and police can search my car for no reason or any reason or made up reason. What?
Well, it seems to be what we're now facing, and it goes even further because the suggestion is if they pull you over to search you, that among other things, they have a right to search your cell phone. You know, and look at your personal records, who you phoned, who you emailed with if you have a so-called smartphone. And that seems to be really running in the direct face, if you will, of the Fourth Amendment limitation on unlawful search and seizures. Until now, fundamental due process rights, the right to notice and opportunity to be heard, and the right against government intrusion on you, which is really what this all is, the search and seizure thing, is how much the government can intrude upon you, recognizing that old but very plain articulation attributed to Abraham Lincoln, that this is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. So, again, we start out with the understanding that the Constitution is the delegation of rights to the government from the people, not from the government to the people. And that's a very important distinction.
Right.
So the Fourth Amendment that speaks about limitations on searches and seizures engaged in by the government has continually been interpreted as a real, meaningful, and plainly articulated limitation on the power of the government to search and or seize property or goods of its citizens, because the citizens are supreme, not over the government. The government isn't supreme over the citizens. So that's the foundation. And the case law over centuries has been, until now, on this inevitable march toward the notion that, in general, the only deviation from this very strict constitutional right could be when and in the event the government, really law enforcement agencies, could articulate either probable cause of an immediate crime or criminal conduct in order to justify a search without a warrant, a warrantless, what we call in the law, a warrantless search, or in the event that law enforcement is in what's been referred to as hot pursuit of a criminal suspect. There is even a body of law that deals with what is referred to in the law as the fruit of the poisonous tree. That if an unlawful search results in discovery of incriminating evidence, that the evidence cannot be used because the underlying search was not permissible.
Right.
Okay. So
I've watched Law and Order. I got that.
Okay, so you got that. So that is sort of the foundational background. Now we have the court saying, well, you know, articulable cause is in the eye of the beholder, in effect. So it's not probable cause, it's whatever law enforcement says. And when we add that up with things like profiling, all of a sudden we find that articulable cause is because you happen to be of color. Or we pulled you over and we see that your driver's license has a Latino name. Or we have a cop that's a little bit funky who pulls over a woman and wants to do a frisk. All of these things are happening, and it seems as if the court is all but sanctioning this now and is turning on its head this basic logical rule that the government is ours, we don't belong to the government. That the rights in the Constitution are limits on the government, they're not limits on us. And that really sounds, I suspect, very much like a libertarian kind of argument, which probably sounds a little crazy coming from an alleged leftist kind of guy like me, but I'm not left and I'm not right. I actually believe in those documents that I learned about in 9th grade in my civics class.
So let me ask you then, to kind of wrap this up, where does this go from? Where does this decision go from here? Because as I'm reading through this, I'm going, how can this possibly be? And how difficult, how onerous is it to get a warrant? I mean, if you truly have probable cause and you have suspicion, how difficult is it to go through the process of doing it the right way, or what yesterday was the right way?
It's really not a difficult process at all. When law enforcement can articulate something, I mean, we can get warrants for things like electronic wiretaps without the person being eavesdropped on even knowing once a warrant is issued. Okay, the threshold for getting a warrant is very low. It's a reasonably articulable suspicion is pretty much the standard for a search warrant. Not knowledge, not clear and convincing evidence, but merely a reasonably articulable suspicion. Okay, I believe that Rick Smith is dealing drugs. Oh, that's a reasonably articulable suspicion.
He's got long hair. I'll bet you he does it.
He wears T-shirts and has long hair.
Yep.
So that's generally enough to get a warrant, but what we're hearing is that in some places where the people have lost control of their government, that law enforcement agencies don't want to be compelled to do even that little bit, that low threshold. And in a society where we worry a great deal from time to time about crazy kinds of crimes where pedophiles are out there, and we want to see what they have on their computers, people get caught up in this notion that we shouldn't have to wait, that we know who the bad guys are. Well, in another generation, the bad guys were people who, had the temerity to challenge the government. So the bad guys during the late 1940s and early 1950s were whoever Senator McCarthy said were bad guys. And so we had a House Un-American Activities Committee that engaged in witch hunts and fundamentally told people that we're going to send you away and we're going to destroy your families and we're going to destroy your lives and strip you of your capacity to work unless you give us the name of somebody else. And that name of somebody else became reasonably articulable suspicion.
Well, we are definitely going down, I think, the wrong path. So how do we undo this? How do we change what do we do?
Well, we do a number of things. First of all, at the state level, we serve notice that we can't stand another 4 years of Corbett. We can't stand another 4 years of this encroachment on our rights. And at the same time, we stand up and we say, damn this silliness about congressional redistricting. We're going to elect people that don't vote against us, whether the Democrats or Republicans. We're going to stop electing people, stop voting for people because they seem like nice guys, because they come to the local firehouse and make a speech, because they have the colossal gall to come to our communities and present us with checks of our own money. We're going to stop voting for members of Congress and United States senators when that comes up here in Pennsylvania, for example, because they happen to be nice folks, and start voting for people who are committed to voting for us, and then hold them accountable so that we can ultimately change our judiciary, change who's on the court, change this insane majority on the U.S. Supreme Court that somehow or another says the right to free speech is a limited right when it comes to pornography, so we can't just pass out pornography and get away with it. When it comes to falsely announcing in a movie theater that there's a fire, okay, that's a constitutional right that has its limits. But when it comes to money on politics, there can't be any right to speech limitation, even though the Constitution doesn't say anything about money, it only says about speech. So we need to walk this back, and we walk it back by participating in politics. We walk it back by electing people who are responsive to us, and then by holding them accountable day in, day out, month in, month out, year in, year out, election cycle in, election cycle out.
With that ultimate thing that brings us term limits, the right to vote. Because I think that's the best weapon against all of these things, and it is the ultimate term limiter.
Well, it is the ultimate term limiter. It has no irrational, arbitrary basis like 2 terms or 4 terms or 6 terms. It's the next cycle. And yesterday in Pennsylvania, yesterday in Wisconsin, we had major victories in protecting that term limiter by protecting the people against these fascistic voter identification laws.
All good stuff, and hopefully that continues, and all of this gets flushed where it belongs. Erwin, always great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Good to be here. Thank you, buddy.
Our good friend, attorney Erwin Aronson. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Don't know much about history. Don't know much biology. Don't know much about the science book. Don't know much about the French I took. But I do know that I need you. And if you fall for all the crap I spew, what a wonderful world this would be.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Entire towns flattened and homes and businesses shredded.
Deadly tornado outbreak rips across the South, but safer building codes still stalled by lawmakers. Good news for those who breathe. The U.S. Supreme Court upholds EPA pollution standards. California now 100% in drought, so governor attacks homeowners associations. Plus,
presto! The motor starts running with the efficiency of an automobile, and nothing is used up but the sunshine, which is free.
Well, I'll be darned.
Happy 60th birthday, Solar Energy.
All of that and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
It's only a matter of time now before we learn that solar power relies on clubbing baby seals.
Of course it does. Am I right, ExxonMobil? This is your Green News Report.
Those shiny panels are made from the gleam in their eyes.
Okay, Desi Doyen, some business here before we begin. First, we welcome aboard our newest affiliate partner, the Progressive Radio Network.
Hello, Progressive Radio Network.
The Green News Report is proud to be on PRN. You can check them out at prn.fm or listen to the Progressive Radio Network on TuneIn. Number 2. All this week in Los Angeles, it is in the 90s. That is 20 degrees higher than the average high for this time of year. Global warming? Don't know. Why worry? Finally, some serious business as this outbreak of tornadoes across the U.S. over the weekend.
Yeah, tornadoes is off to a deadly start. The severe storm system is still wreaking havoc across the eastern half of the nation this week. The spate of tornadoes so far has already killed 30 people in 6 states and injured hundreds. One local TV meteorologist was forced to evacuate the studio live on air in Tupelo, Mississippi, in the middle of their tornado coverage.
Everybody basement now. Basement now. Go. What? Jay, now!
Forecasting technologies have improved immeasurably in recent years and provided some areas up to 30 minutes of warning for this outbreak. But tornado warnings aren't much help if there's no safe shelter to evacuate to. New policies to boost resilience against extreme weather events, like updated building codes and funding to help communities build storm shelters, have stalled in Congress and in state legislatures, like Oklahoma, where the state legislature this year voted against funding for storm shelters in schools, even after being hit by multiple record deadly tornadoes.
They still haven't voted for shelters? This is amazing to me. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. We used to get tornado warnings all the time. We could go down into the basement, which was frightening enough. I can't imagine the people in Oklahoma and Texas where they don't have basements in their houses. They've got nowhere to go.
The risk of violent tornadoes does appear to be increasing, but a lack of historical records means there's just not enough data on how climate change is affecting the ingredients of tornadoes. The U.S. Supreme Court on Tuesday upheld a critical clean air standard that will protect people in 28 states from toxic air pollution. The justices upheld the EPA's cross-state air pollution rule that requires polluting power plants in the South and the Midwest to reduce their toxic smog that blows across state borders into downwind states.
2 justices, Scalia and Thomas, were both against this. Apparently, they feel it's fine to pollute the air in one state and let it go to another state, and hey, that's your problem.
Record drought intensifies in California.
Tell me about it.
Governor Jerry Brown has issued a second drought disaster declaration after the U.S. Drought Monitor declared 100% of the state now officially in moderate to extreme drought. While the drought is raising food prices and intensifying conflict between farmers and the fracking industry over water usage, Governor Brown reserved special criticism for homeowners associations, telling them to stop levying fines against homeowners whose lawns have turned brown because they refuse to waste the state's drinking water on watering their grass.
During the worst drought in recorded history in California.
Right.
Got it.
Finally,
Well, the science boys have come up with a sunshine kick that makes electricity out of your sunlight. You mean the solar battery? Yeah. Doc, that's big news.
April marks the 60th birthday of solar energy. The first ever practical solar cell was presented to the world by Bell Labs 60 years ago in April 1954 and explained in this vintage educational film discovered by Peter Sinclair of ClimateCrocs.com.
They'll have to build efficient generators that spread out over acres, even square miles, to compete with the cheap coal and oil still available to us. The answer must be sun power from our Mr. Sun.
Yep, even in 1954, they foresaw conflict with cheap fossil fuels. Now the solar industry is booming around the world and almost equal to or cheaper than fossil fuels in generating electricity.
It's a great little video, a great find by Peter Sinclair. We'll have the entire clip up at our website, greennews.bradblog.com, and it stars Eddie Albert of Green Acres fame.
A very young Eddie Albert.
Indeed.
Hilarious.
For much more on that and the stories we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Fresh air.
Times Square.
You are my wife.
Goodbye, City Life.
Green Acres, we are there.
been a film-waste presentation, darling.
I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
The billionaires don't want you to vote this year. We'll send you a message that's loud and clear that the votes can't be counted in your community. Why even register? Don't waste your energy. Don't go to the polls on election day, because we bought the election and it better go our way. And on election night, we'll sit back and gloat. The billionaires don't want you to vote. If you're happy with George Bush in charge.
Yeah, don't vote. Don't bother. If you're happy with Tom Corbett, stay home. If you're happy with the way things are going, you're happy with a Gini coefficient of over 4, if you're happy with mass redistribution of wealth from the people who work and create it, well, to those who sit in our corporate boardrooms and sit on Wall Street and gamble with your retirement, don't bother. Stay home. Stay home. Kind of reminds me, and I've said this before, kind of reminds me of my high school government teacher who said, don't stay home. Don't vote. Don't bother. You're not smart enough to vote. Yeah, you don't know what's going on, and you shouldn't. Just stay home. This way makes my vote that much more powerful. And the thing is, I used to believe that. I used to go, okay, well, I want dumb people to stay home, because if you don't know what the issues are, you shouldn't stay. When I really should be saying what I want are people to educate themselves and cut through the noise and the sound bites and what's constantly fed into our ears. And look at what's going on in your life. Look at the fact that wages have actually gone down in the last 30 years. In my working life, wages have gone backwards. And not just a little bit, massively. And I think about my first real job. I was working my first real job when I got it. I was out of, I didn't have the money to go to college. Was broke. I got my first real job working in the freight industry. I was making $15 an hour. I had health care, and I had pension contributions. So you throw all that together, it's probably over $20 an hour. You look today, and I just happened to see one of the big package companies, and I'm not going to say which one they are, FedEx, is, oh, I did say it, didn't I? Yeah. They're offering, and you can hear it on the radio, they're saturating the airwaves with this great part-time job of $11.50 an hour with no health care and no pension. $11.50 an hour. And I'm going, wait a second. Hold on. I remember, 25, almost 30 years ago, making more than that. I remember all those years back there doing, loading trucks, making $15 an hour, where they're saying, now a great part-time job is $11.50. And I'm going, really? I must have a different definition of what a great part-time job is. I'm curious, do you think this is a great part-time job? I mean, is $11.50 enough for you to go, oh, well, I'm going to give up 4 hours each night, and I'm going to bust my behind loading packages into a car for, really? Is that which is why I think voting is so important. And you look today, as I pointed out, today the Senate filibustered a minimum wage increase, which would have sent a ripple effect upward, got more wages into people's pockets, thus more money into the local economy, and forward. But what we heard was a resounding no. And the apologists, the conservative apologists, the think tank shills and the ilk, they come out and they say, well, we should be talking about other ways of doing it. We should talk about other ways of raising people's wages. And understand, I'm very open. I've said on this program before, I'm very much a conservative, green, liberal, libertarian. If it's a good idea, it's a good idea. I don't care what label you slap on it. The earned income tax credit was not a bad idea. It did sure up the bottom. I'm all in favor of that. It rewarded work. I'm all in favor of that. The problem I have with it is you've got the Romney class of this world who then tell the middle income people and just a little bit above that, hey, you know, those people they're not paying their taxes and you're paying a whole bunch. They're paying nothing. In fact, we're paying them. Without actually asking the question, well, why are we paying them? Oh, that's right, because we've set up a low-wage workforce. I would love to hear someone give me an explanation on how that works. How is it that a billionaire tells people making $50,000, $60,000 a year that someone making $10,000, $12,000 a year is the reason the economy's struggling and the reason the country's in deep financial problems? I would love to hear someone explain that to me because I'm missing it. Especially when you talk about these workers working in industries where the industries are wildly profitable. CEOs have these lucrative packages with golden parachutes and you name it. Living in conditions that you and I honestly could not fathom. You know, I cannot, and I know some very rich people. I could not fathom living the lifestyle that they, and nor would I want to. Understand, in their very prim and proper world, I'm a jeans and t-shirt guy. I'm the kind of guy who I'm just more apt to tell you to go pound sand than I am to sit down and appease you. But these folks, they live in their little world of people waiting. The other thing is, you know, I can't have people waiting on me. It's this working class ethos. You know, when you go to the hotel, it's not that I don't want the guy. I'll tip the guy and carry my own bag just because it's just how I am. I can't imagine walking into a place and expecting the people who work there to take care of me. I can't imagine. Have you ever seen some of those royalty shows where the butlers go in and dress people? I could never. And I know they say never. I'm saying never. I could never have someone dress me. But we have a class of people in this country that's their expectation. And like I talked about the other night, I actually got a job request. Someone wanted me to, you know, it's one of those, they sent it out to a whole bunch of people, I'm sure. But I got it, and they wanted someone to basically run their life for $400 a week. They wanted them to pay all their bills and do all their work and clean up and do this and clean up after them and basically run all of their appointments and all of their life, book all of their travel, take care of all of the, the paperwork and this and that and the other stuff. It's really amazing. It's amazing what we've allowed to crop up around us and how the wealth class of this country has taken advantage of it. I was talking to somebody today who said, well, I can't imagine us going back to a really high tax rate. I go, I think 70% is right. You fill it with loopholes and you give them options and say, okay, you can spend the money the way you want, but you gotta invest it here and in things that are going to benefit our society. And I would love to hear someone tell me, Rick, you're wrong. But I'm not. And that's the reality. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. Stitcher on the smartphone. You can always email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, if you got any thoughts, questions, comments, whatever's on your mind. Quick break, right back with hour 2. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
It's the Rick Smith Show on Country Gold Radio, WIOO Carlisle, and WEEO Shippensburg.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. A vote to raise the minimum wage is expected as soon as Wednesday in the U.S. Senate. Republicans in Congress, though, continue to successfully block an increase in the federal minimum wage. Currently at $7.25 an hour, Democrats want to raise it to $10.10 an hour by 2016. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that raising that minimum wage would help 16.5 million U.S. workers, but would also likely eliminate around 500,000 jobs. 21 U.S. states have minimum wages higher than the federal rate. In a video advocating raising the minimum wage posted online, retail worker Philip Morgan describes what it's like trying to get by on a minimum wage.
Half my money goes to rent, and I'm diabetic, so the next big chunk of my money goes to medicine. And then there's food and transportation, and then I have nothing left. That's it.
The California Federation of Teachers is boycotting Staples to protest Postal Service privatization of retail mail service at the office supply store chain. The teachers won't buy any school supplies from Staples. The American Postal Workers Union requested the action. APWU sees the U.S. Postal Service deal with Staples as a privatization move that destroys good-paying union postal jobs. A coalition of 4 postal unions are banding together to fight the Staples deal and the loss of postal jobs and degradation of mail service the unions say goes along with privatization. A coalition of 14 Detroit public worker unions, including AFSCME, says an agreement reached with the city offers an opportunity for the unions to provide regular input and guidance to city managers over the next 5 years. The agreement covers 3,500 workers. Full details of the deal haven't yet been released. Public safety unions are not in the coalition. The police and fire unions in Detroit have yet to reach a new deal with the city as Detroit's bankruptcy proceeds in court. Ed McNeil, spokesman for the Coalition of Detroit Unions, says Detroit's emergency manager Kevin Orr is privatizing Detroit public services like garbage collection and water and sewer operations, even though privatization too often proves ineffective. The Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, and the Association of Professional Flight Attendants are in negotiations with the merged American Airlines. Talks will continue for 150 days in an effort to reach agreement on a joint new contract for 24,000 flight attendants. American has announced record profits. A new agreement is expected to be in place by 2015. Meanwhile, AFA-CWA has elected new leaders. Sarah Nelson is the new president of the union. Deborah Sutor was elected vice president. On Wednesday, the AFL-CIO will project a 90 by 60-foot anti-deportation piece of art onto its building in Washington, D.C. to highlight the deportation crisis impact on immigrant workers. The projection will contain the names and stories of deported immigrant workers. The AFL-CIO supports comprehensive immigration reform with a path to citizenship and an end to the deportations that rip apart immigrant worker families. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Somebody's watching you, do you like it? Somebody's watching you, do you care?
Well, why would you care if someone was watching if you're not doing anything wrong? Why would you care if they're checking what you've got in the car? Why would you care if they're checking what drugs you're taking from your doctor's prescription? Why would you care if you're not doing anything wrong? Huh? Why would you care? Well, because I got that little piece of paper, that Constitution thing that especially the righties love to say that they carry around. And I don't doubt that the likes of Daryl Metcalf and the other insaniacs, the Stephen Kings of the world, I don't doubt that they carry their little pocket Constitution with them. I just question if they've ever opened it up. Carrying it's one thing. Actually opening it up and looking at those things that are inside, words, whole different ball of wax. Anyway, there's a piece of legislation banging around in Harrisburg, sponsored by my state Senator Pat Vance, Senate Bill 1180, which I guess is going to give the state the ability to look at what drugs I'm taking. Or I don't even really get it, other than maybe they care about me because I'm not doing anything wrong. They just care. Here to talk a little bit about it is Andy Hoover. He's legislative director for the Pennsylvania ACLU. Andy, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick. It's good to talk with you, as always.
So, Pat Vance cares what drugs I'm taking.
Apparently, she wants to know, or at least she wants the Department of Health to know, and potentially Cumberland County District Attorney Dave Freed to know. Yeah, you summed it up in a nutshell quite well. Essentially what this bill does is it creates a database at the Department of Health, the State Department of Health, with prescription records for anybody who gets a prescription or a medication that's on Schedules 2 through 5 of the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Now that sounds legal and technical, but essentially that means most prescription medications.
But because they care, right? I mean, they just want to make sure that I don't have a doctor who's insane and gives me 2 prescriptions that would harm me. How nice of them.
Yes, that is their argument. Their argument is that there are people who are addicted to prescription drugs, and they move from doctor to doctor getting these drugs.
Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah, yes, Rush Limbaugh, and then he takes them overseas. But and then there are, of course, there's the argument, of course, also of doctors who are pushing these medications as well, or they're enabling this behavior. The problem is that there is a very slim minority of people that actually do that. The rest of us who take prescription medication do so the way it's supposed to be taken, and our right to privacy will be compromised because of that small minority of people.
Oh, silly man. Privacy rights.
I know they may be diminishing, but some of us are trying to hang on to them.
As we should, and I remember, and help me if I'm wrong here, but didn't the ACLU defend Limbaugh in his doctor shopping the endeavor a couple years back?
I don't know a whole lot of detail. Essentially what happened there was a search issue. There was a question about the way the DA searched Limbaugh's records, and we basically argued it was a Fourth Amendment issue, which kind of dovetails right back to this discussion of Senate Bill 1180.
So just so I get this straight in my head, and listeners get it, it's not because they care about me. It's because they want to get those people who are getting the OxyContin to sell to Rush.
Sort of. I mean, they want to know what everybody is taking so that they can crack down on prescription drug abuse, they say. The problem is that the monitoring of the prescription drugs does not necessarily deter the desire to get high. There have been states and there have been studies that have been showing that these prescription monitoring programs don't really do a lot to reduce opioid overdoses, and they have minimal impact on opioid abuse. The reason is because people who are using prescription drugs then move to heroin. They don't sell heroin in a pharmacy. I think you and your listeners are all aware of that, so it's not monitored in that way like this program would do. And so they get heroin on the streets. In Maryland, when they moved to an electronic health record system, they found that heroin overdoses spiked 41% in the first 7 months that they had this program. You know, it's like taking a balloon and squeezing it,
right.
And the balloon may shrink under your hand, but then it just pops up outside of your hand, and essentially it's just displacing the addiction. It doesn't get rid of it.
And at the end of the day, at some point, I'm hoping society grows up and realizes that no matter what you do, there are still going to be a segment of the population who are going to do this. And I'm thinking of the Chris Rock comedy bit where he said, if you did away with all of the drugs, everything, booze, crack, whatever, you did away with all of it, you'd still find people in their basement becoming chemists, putting lima beans and gasoline together.
Exactly. It is a continuation of the failed war on drugs mentality. Going back to the Nixonian approach when he declared the war on drugs in 1971. It is a continuation of the prosecution and incarcerate mentality. And the reason why I say that is because one of the biggest cheerleaders, or two of the biggest cheerleaders for this legislation are the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association, whose president is your DA, and the Office of the Attorney General. And they have made sure that they can get these records with a very low standard known as reasonable suspicion.
Again, back to that whole reasonable suspicion thing.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. I mean, essentially, if a prosecutor or police want to come into your home and search your medicine cabinet, they have to go to a court and show probable cause, which essentially means they have reason to believe that you specifically have committed a crime, and that your activity has a very low likelihood that it is innocent behavior. They want to use, and the bill allows prosecutors to use this reasonable suspicion standard, which is used in very narrow circumstances. It's used to justify a traffic stop. It's used to justify searches in public schools and in prisons, basically places where people have a lower expectation of privacy. We've been arguing that these are your prescription records. I mean, this provides a window into your personal medical situation and history that actually should have a heightened expectation of privacy, not a lower expectation of privacy.
Yeah, one would think that, and I agree. But, you look at this, and this change in language is interesting to me because, this reasonable suspicion down from probable cause, and you look at what just came out today, the story of our Supreme Court actually lowering that reasonable suspicion bar even lower to search my car, and I got to be honest, I'm a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, so there's actually two Supreme Court rulings that are worth mentioning in the last 2 weeks, one from the United States and one from Pennsylvania. The one you're referencing just came down, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday. Pennsylvania law for, I don't even know how far back it goes, but maybe it's to the invention of the car. It requires a police officer in a traffic stop to get a warrant if the police officer needs to search the car. He has to get a warrant from a court.
Right.
This ruling says that he does not need to get that search warrant now to search your car. Now, the court tried to split hairs here, split the baby, and say they still need probable cause, but it's solely at the judgment of the police officer on the scene whether or not he has probable cause. There's no judge involved. So there's no check on the police power, essentially, except after the fact.
Let's quick go to the phones and see what the caller has to say. You're on the air. What's on your mind?
Yes, back in the fall, I went to a yard sale.
Okay.
And anyways, I live in the area right outside of Carlisle, and we have state police. Well, a homeless person actually told the state police that I stole 2 hinges and a tape from him.
Did you?
And no.
Okay.
And here's what happens. In February, I get a letter I have to go through Susan Day, the Justice of the Peace. So there's a hearing, and you have to post $192 for the hearing. I went to the DA's office to find out if I could get a public defender. So he sends me to the public defender's office, and I show him the paperwork that I got from the Justice of the Peace. And he literally started laughing. He said, I don't think this will hold up. It'll be thrown out of court. So anyways, he didn't offer to help me or anything, and he is paid by taxpayers' money. So I ended up going to the hearing, and it took exactly 8 minutes with this state trooper. Yes, the state trooper had me arrested.
Nice.
And I couldn't afford an attorney, and it took 8 minutes, and this man said he was homeless. He also said I drove a white truck with a red top on it, which the state police never even checked out, but somehow he got my number, license plate number, okay, and they tracked me down. Now, in 8 minutes, I was found guilty.
Oh, wow.
Now, it gets better. So anyways, in 8 minutes, I'm found guilty. Now, I'm leaving JP's office upset. Out comes this homeless man, and it's an older motor home that kind of looks like the old-fashioned square box trailers. He gets in this motor home, and off he drives, and then off drives the state policeman. Well, I have been trying under the Freedom of Information Act and Right to Know to get a transcript of my trial by the JP, Susan Day, of what transpired, because I would like to take this to the ACLU. Because, number one, I didn't do it, but they didn't even give me a chance to ask this man questions they wouldn't let me ask. Well, the moral of the story is I'm just finding out that because it was the state police, they don't have to give me, they never came and even talked to me, but they don't have to give me a transcript of this 8-minute trial that they found me guilty at.
Interesting. I'm not a lawyer. I don't have any thoughts on it. Let me ask Andy what he thinks. Any thoughts on that, Andy?
Well, that's what goes on at the lower levels of the courts can be sometimes horrifying, and of course I don't want to give legal advice to this specific situation, but it doesn't surprise me, quite frankly. I mean, we hear about situations that happen at the district judge level And unfortunately, you don't, depending upon the grading of the charge, if it's a summary offense, your right to a lawyer is diminished. But the story gets me right into the other United States Supreme Court case, which is definitely worth mentioning. This one's from the United States Supreme Court, but the other one we talked about was from the state. Last week, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in a case called Navarrete v. California that one anonymous, uncorroborated tip, a call to 911, was enough to justify a traffic stop. And so when you started telling your story and you said that this homeless person accused you of this crime, it's essentially what happened in this case. A woman called 911 and said that she had been run off the road by a vehicle. She described the vehicle. Somehow she got the license plate number, even though she was run off the road. The police found the vehicle. They followed it for 5 minutes. They saw no signs of erratic driving or drunken driving, but they still pulled the vehicle over because of thanks to the 911 call.
Right.
So the court ruled that was constitutional, and they said that it was it fit this standard of reasonable suspicion that we're talking about with this prescription drug bill. One anonymous, uncorroborated tip was enough to justify a traffic stop, even though the police actually saw the person and saw no signs of the person committing a crime.
And that's the question I have for this woman. Did they ever find the hinges?
No, I guess not, because they didn't bring that up. But I do want to tell you this. I had 30 days to file an appeal, and I had to put $1,000 down with an attorney and then give him another $1,000 within 2 months. And I couldn't afford to do this because I live on limited income, and I do not live off of welfare. I live off of my Social Security. But the point being is, I could go to Rick Smith's house and visit him, and he only knows me as a person from the radio station, and I can leave there and I can go up to the state police barracks and file a charge through them. And then it's his job to prove that he didn't do it. That's exactly what it was explained to me.
Yeah,
so
that sounds completely backwards of what our legal system is.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Now I wrote the letter to the JP under the Freedom of Information Act and the Right to Know Act. And they don't have to give me anything. You can go to the clerk of courts. They don't have to give you anything. You can go to court administrating, and they don't have to give you anything.
Yeah, I don't know about that. So.
Well, I do.
Okay.
But I'm still waiting on a reply. I have to give them a full 30 days to reply to the first letter. Now, if I possibly can get anything like this, then I may be able to find an attorney pro bono to go after this, because this is not the first time I'm finding out that things are not quite right, because according to our Constitution, I am guilty until
you're innocent until proven guilty, and I agree with you.
This is backwards. And if you want, I'll send you all the paperwork that I'm telling the truth. No one believes this can happen, though, but it has happened.
What's amazing to me is it happened to you, and you're all fired up, and you're right. 'Cause people don't believe it can happen to them, and they don't get all fired up until it does happen to them. And I appreciate the call. Thanks so much. What are your thoughts on that? Last line of questioning. Got to take a quick break here. What are your thoughts on that, Andy? I mean, because she's right. Things seem to be backwards in a lot of these cases.
Yeah, and that's the problem when you have the lower the charge, the easier it is to get railroaded, because you don't have a public defender paying as much attention, especially if you don't have a private lawyer. Public defender is not going to pay attention to a low-level case like that. The DA may not even be involved if it's low enough, and because it may just be through the police and the DJ. Right. And the DJs, this issue about the transcript, I don't know this for certain, but I'm pretty sure they don't have to have a recorder there. A court reporter.
Yeah, I don't remember there being one because I got railroaded into a situation not too long ago, and they didn't record anything. So I don't even know if it's possible to have those recordings. And I'll ask her, when I go to break. Last thing though, this 1180 bill, Vance's bill. What are we doing? What do we do? What's the marching order? What's tomorrow's thing to check off of our list?
Call your state senator and tell them that the Senate Bill 1180 needs more privacy protection, that there needs to be a stronger standard for prosecutors to get there, to get into the database. An amendment actually by Senator Mike Fulmer would do that. It's a positive amendment. It requires probable cause and a search warrant for prosecutors to get into it. So support the Fulmer amendment to Senate Bill 1180.
I'm a big fan of search warrants. Yeah, do what the Constitution says. Andy, it's always great talking with you. I always appreciate you coming on the program and filling us in on this stuff.
All right, thanks, Rick. Take care.
Always great. Our good friend Andy Hoover, Legislative Director for the ACLU of Pennsylvania. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
This Mother's Day, don't settle for the same old box of chocolates. Give Mom a gift she'll really appreciate. A gift that'll truly make a difference. Give her a heart necklace made by women who have survived actual war in South Sudan. These necklaces contain Swarovski crystals and are simply stunning. They come in all different colors and sizes, and best of all, they help fund a great cause. It's what Mom would want. To purchase your gift, visit goatsfortheoldgoat.com and click on Shop. Again, that's goatsfortheoldgoat.com/shop.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. You know, it's one of those things, and look, I agree with the lady, but it's amazing how people get fired up when it's their rights being infringed on. When it's other people, when it's those people, we seem to be kind of okay with that. When it's the drug dealer where they found drugs on him, but how many people did they search that they didn't find drugs on? How many of those people do we get to search? And you look at New York, they were stopping and frisking just about everyone. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Bill on line one. How you doing tonight, Bill?
Good, Rick. Listen, I was listening to your conversation there, and there used to be a local attorney, had a radio show, Carl Rominger. Now, he got into some personal problems and everything, which is quite unfortunate.
Yeah.
But he gave tremendously good advice that needs to be widely known, needs to be widely shared. Maybe Attorney Aronson could, set up something where our listeners, your listeners, could get a little of the same information that Carl Rominger used to give. And basically, what it boils down to, when you are stopped by the police for any reason, you are, in their eyes, you are guilty, and the minute you open your mouth.
Yep.
You basically have to invoke your rights from the very beginning and very politely refuse to give any information without the presence of your attorney. That is the key factor right there, because they will use anything you say against you. That's their job.
I think I've heard that before, Bill. I think I've heard that. There's some warning they give you when they arrest you that you should know that the second they stop you, you're being sequestered. It's almost like being arrested.
Well, they don't always tell you, though, or they put it in such an obtuse way you don't quite understand it.
But all of us have watched Law and Order. We know.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're all. I mean, most of us are innocent to begin with, and honest to begin with, and we feel that by cooperating, by being friendly and nice and this and that and the other thing, you'll get some kind of consideration. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to immediately invoke your rights, not say anything more, and just in general be somewhat aware that one real important point that Carl Rominger used to make, that he had to tell people this over and over again because they didn't quite get it. You cannot lie to a policeman.
Nope.
If you are stopped and even if you didn't do anything but you lied, and they can prove that you lied, they will use it against you.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, they can lie to you about anything. They do not have to tell you the truth. So it's a double standard to begin with. But you basically have to keep your damn mouth shut, and that's what that lady should have done. Until she did get. I mean, she absolutely had a right to an attorney, and it could have been very. I mean, it never even would have come to a hearing if the procedures had been followed properly. That's my understanding, anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I don't know the whole story, and I'm sure she'll send me some stuff, and you can send me anything you want, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm always interested, and I the best I can do is I have one of my lawyer friends give me an opinion on it. I don't know, they're not going to go any further than that. But,
No, but just a basic outline, a working outline that your listeners can incorporate in their. See, Rominger used to even have videos and stuff up. I guess it's a damn shame he's not around now. But I mean,
that addiction will kill you.
Let's face it, Rick. We know, you and I know, the listeners know, we are more and more heading into a police state. I mean, there's no question about it. And so we've got to be more and more defensive. We cannot live, like la-di-da, like back in the 50s or something. We can't do it anymore.
But Bill, if you're not doing anything wrong, why do you care?
Yeah, right. Yeah, tell that to probably at least 20% of the people in prison.
What do you think? It's that low?
No, actually, I think it's a lot higher. But I'm trying to be.
You're being nice. All right, I got you. All right. I appreciate the call and the thoughts, and I will try and incorporate some of that because you're right. I think a lot of people, until it happens to them, they don't believe it can happen. That whole can't happen here mentality.
And they have no idea. They really don't know how much our country's changed. They really don't understand it.
And it's always easy to point your finger at somebody else. Well, we should do it to them. Which I love.
Absolutely. Until we are them.
And that's it. And that's the exact message there. Bill, I appreciate the call. Always great having you on the program. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
No, I mean, I remember, look, the reality is, I remember just recently, this is one of those, I have an accountant who does my taxes. And there was a year, and I think I've told this story because I was really upset about it when it happened. My accountant did my taxes and filed the form with who he thought was, now this is supposed to be his job. He's supposed to know this beyond this, but evidently the school tax and the city tax people couldn't agree on a common tax collector. So they each had their own. And who would have ever thought that? But they couldn't agree. They had their own little, I'm sure there was some payola involved in it. But for these a year or two, they had their own different ones. So my accountant pays the taxes to the one that had been the tax collector for years, figuring everything's taken care of. Well, a couple years later, I get the thing in the mail, summons to court, that I got to go to court because I didn't provide my taxes. And I walked in there, and I sat down to the district justice or the JP or whatever he is here, and I said, here, this is reality. This is what the accountant said. And I figured I got a shot. I paid my taxes. I did what I was supposed to. I can't help it that these people did. And I remember him going, I'm sure we can come to an amicable agreement like all of the others. And while I was sitting in this room for the hour that I was there had to be 100 people just like me who came through. In fact, there were so many people just like me that the tax collector had a person like staffed there. And he says, we can come to an amicable agreement. I'm going to fine you this, you're going to pay this fee, and you're going to pay this. And it was, I think, like $120, $150, something like this. And he goes, I think we can come to an amicable agreement. And I basically said, I guess that depends on what your definition of amicable is. If you agree that rape is amicable, then yes, this is an amicable agreement. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
The color of your skin don't matter to me.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Entire towns flattened and homes and businesses shredded.
Deadly tornado outbreak rips across the South, but safer building codes still stalled by lawmakers. Good news for those who breathe. The U.S. Supreme Court upholds EPA pollution standards. California now 100% in drought, so governor attacks homeowners associations? Plus,
Presto! The motor starts running with the efficiency of an automobile, and nothing is used up but the sunshine, which is free.
Well, I'll be darned.
happy 60th birthday, Solar Energy.
All of that and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
So it's only a matter of time now before we learn that solar power relies on clubbing baby seals.
Of course it does. Am I right, ExxonMobil? This is your Green News Report.
Those shiny panels are made from the gleam in their eyes.
Okay, Desi Doyen, some business here before we begin. First, we welcome aboard our newest affiliate partner, the Progressive Radio Network.
Hello, Progressive Radio Network.
The Green News Report is proud to be on PRN. You can check them out at prn.fm or listen to the Progressive Radio Network on TuneIn. Number 2, all this week in Los Angeles, it is in the 90s. That is 20 degrees higher than the average high for this time of year. Global warming? Don't know. Why worry? Finally, some serious business as this outbreak of tornadoes across the U.S. over the weekend.
Yeah, tornado season is off to a deadly start. The severe storm system is still wreaking havoc across the eastern half of the nation this week. The spate of tornadoes so far has already killed 30 people in 6 states and injured hundreds. One local TV meteorologist was forced to evacuate the studio live on air in Tupelo, Mississippi, in the middle of their tornado coverage.
Everybody basement now. Basement now. Go. What? Jay, now!
Forecasting technologies have improved immeasurably in recent years and provided some areas up to 30 minutes of warning for this outbreak. But tornado warnings aren't much help if there's no safe shelter to evacuate to. New policies to boost resilience against extreme weather events, like updated building codes and funding to help communities build storm shelters, have stalled in Congress and in state legislatures, like Oklahoma, where the state legislature this year voted against funding for storm shelters in schools, even after being hit by multiple record deadly tornadoes.
They still haven't voted for shelters? This is amazing to me. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. We used to get tornado warnings all the time. We could go down into the basement, which was frightening enough. I can't imagine the people in Oklahoma and Texas where they don't have basements in their houses. They've got nowhere to go.
The risk of violent tornadoes does appear to be increasing, but a lack of historical records means there's just not enough data on how climate change is affecting the ingredients of tornadoes. The U.S. Supreme Court on Tuesday upheld a critical clean air standard that will protect people in 28 states from toxic air pollution. The justices upheld the EPA's cross-state air pollution rule that requires polluting power plants in the South and the Midwest to reduce their toxic smog that blows across state borders into downwind states.
2 justices, Scalia and Thomas, were both against this. Apparently, they feel it's fine to pollute the air in one state and let it go to another state. And hey, that's your problem.
Record drought intensifies in California.
Tell me about it.
Governor Jerry Brown has issued a second drought disaster declaration after the U.S. Drought Monitor declared 100% of the state now officially in moderate to extreme drought. While the drought is raising food prices and intensifying conflict between farmers and the fracking industry over water usage, Governor Brown reserved special criticism for homeowners associations, telling them to stop levying fines against homeowners whose lawns have turned brown because they refuse to waste the state's drinking water on watering their grass.
During the worst drought in recorded history in California.
Right.
Got it.
Finally,
Well, the science boys have come up with a sunshine kick that makes electricity out of your sunlight.
You mean the solar battery? Yeah, Doc, that's big news.
April marks the 60th birthday of solar energy. The first ever practical solar cell was presented to the world by Bell Labs 60 years ago in April 1954 and explained in this vintage educational film discovered by Peter Sinclair of ClimateCrocs.com.
They'll have to build efficient generators that spread out over acres, even square miles, to compete with the cheap coal and oil still available to us. The answer must be sun power from our Mr. Sun.
Yep, even in 1954, they foresaw conflict with cheap fossil fuels. Now the solar industry is booming around the world and almost equal to or cheaper than fossil fuels in generating electricity.
It's a great little video, a great find by Peter Sinclair. We'll have the entire clip up at our website, greennews.bradblog.com, and it stars Eddie Albert of Green Acres fame.
A very young Eddie Albert.
Indeed.
Hilarious.
For much more on that and the stories we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Fresh air.
Times Square.
You are my wife.
Goodbye, City Life.
Green Acres, we are there.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
We need to stand united, for undivided we shall never fall. Remember all, we need to trust in and then forever call our brothers and our sisters. And are you and I aware? You and I both know that we can rely on it. The time is prime, planets align and no mistaking. For union resurrection, the anger has awakened. The sleeping giant, come on, yeah, we can do it. We need to revive, re-amp, and re-up the labor movement.
Oh boy, if that isn't the truth. We need to get people organized. We need to get people standing together and saying, you know what, enough is enough. There's only so much of, you know what, we're willing to eat, and we are full. And you look across this country, and as I've been talking about, look, wages have not only been stagnant for the last 30 years, they've been going backwards. And employers have taken every loophole, every avenue, every crack in our labor laws and exploited them. And this latest thing that I've been focusing on, this misclassification of workers, hey, you're an independent, you're your own boss, you're an independent contractor, yet I'm going to tell you where to go, what to do, how much you're going to make, when you're going to make it, and you're going to wear what I tell you to wear and follow my rules. But hey, you're your own boss. You got to love that. You got to love the gall that goes in this. And there are people who have said, enough already, which is why we've been focusing a lot of attention on what's going on down in Savannah, Georgia, as the port truck drivers are saying, you know what? We demand respect. We demand a decent a shot at making a middle-class wage, and we demand respect. And to me, that's the big one, which is why we've asked Yasser Castillo. He's one of the workers down in the ports of Savannah. He's not one of the misclassified workers, but he's standing in solidarity with them. Yasser, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, this is Yasser.
Tell me, how did you get involved in this? I mean, from the outside, you're not a misclassified worker. You're not your quote-unquote own boss. How does this affect you?
Oh, well, for years and years, I was supposed to be a owner operator too, a truck driver, owner operator, and now I'm a company driver, and it's affecting us the same way. Every time they tell us what to do, they always they say you're your own boss, but you can do this, you can do that. So it's just
the one part of being the boss that you get is you get all of the responsibility, especially when you can't shoulder it, all of the fuel costs, all of the repair costs, all of that stuff that goes into it. As we've been talking about. Now tell me, I understand Monday they had a big event. It was Workers' Memorial Day. I know you had some folks come out and for an event. Tell me about it.
Yeah, we went out on strike because two of our workers, which they were misclassified as independent contractors, they got fired. Our boss fired them because they stand up. They said enough is enough, and we are drivers as well as you are, and they got fired. So that's why we went out there and we had the strike.
And what does that mean to you? I mean, the reality is, I can't imagine. Now, you're a company driver, so I would have to assume that you're at their whim, and that this can't be good for you, because I understand Georgia, like Pennsylvania, at will state, they can fire you for any reason, as I understand, right?
Well, we're here in California, so we have the right, we have rights that we could go out there and say what we have to say. I mean, stand up for ourselves,
So tell me about your personal background, because, I've talked to a number of port drivers over the last year, 2 years actually, especially the guys at the Toll Brothers Group and those who said, they never imagined, they never thought they would be part of a union. In fact, a lot of them were very anti the idea of joining a union because, hey, I'm going to get mine and hooray for me. I'm curious your story. Do you have any union background, anything like that?
You know what? I have never been in a union. When I came into this company, I was an anti-union. I didn't want any union because everything they talk about, it was the wrong thing. They were saying the union is after your money. Union is not going to help you for anything. But then I started, talking to people that had union, and I started going into the internet and finding out that, having a union is not bad, it's a good thing. So that's why I became a union supporter. I'm not a union active yet. I'm just a supporter because we're trying to get the union into our company.
Yes, sir. You're an activist right now. The reality is that you're willing to step forward. You've already got the badge of courage, in my view. This idea that you're willing to step forward and say, you know what, this is important. This is how we build the middle class. This is how we make our lives better. And good on you for it.
Yes. I had to do it because, there's a lot of people that they're afraid because our boss is telling them, if you join the union, you're going to get fired. All these people that is outside, they're all fired. They're not gonna go back as soon as everything finished. All these people are going to get fired. You're not going to get a job anywhere else because you're an activist. And it's all lie, and everybody's afraid, In our company, everybody's afraid that they're going to get fired and they're not going to find any job anywhere else because they joined the union. So that's why we're having issues with a lot of people that they're afraid. That's why I had to stand, for myself, for my family, for our workers that they were disqualified and they got fired. For anything, just because they decided to join the union.
And that, as everyone knows, is illegal, and it takes people to back you up. But the reality is there is power in numbers, and what the corporate class is scared to death of is that you and me and other working people are going to come together and say, you know what, we've been exploited, we've been used and abused and discarded. It's time that we demand the wealth that we create.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we went out there and stand for ourselves, and we had this strike yesterday for 48 hours, and we went back to work today, and no retaliations, but everybody, like I say, everybody's afraid of they see what we do, and we don't get fired, but inside our company, they're telling them that as soon as this is finished, as soon as this is over, everybody's going to get fired, and that's the big issue right now. Everybody's misqualified. They have a lot of supposedly owner-operators, and they have us as the drivers. And we do the same thing. We do the same thing.
So for you, the reality is that this whole scheme that they've developed, this fracture of our labor law, allowing for the misclassification of employees to be considered independent contractors, if you could end that, it would actually not only help you, but it would help them as well by making sure that everyone is considered an employee, because you're both doing the exact same job.
Exactly. Like I said, we haul from the port. to the customers, and we do the same thing. So I don't see where is the difference between an owner operator or a company driver, because
I can tell you where, Yasser. I can tell you where the difference is. The owner operator, for the misclassified independent, quote unquote, independent contractor, the company doesn't have to pay unemployment. They don't have to pay workers' comp. They don't have to pay taxes. They don't have to pay anything other than the few dollars that they give them to make the run. For an employee, you've got to actually make sure that those employees meet state and federal labor laws.
Yes, exactly. That's the whole point. Yeah, that's the point.
And it's a race to the bottom. I mean, if you allow these people to be exploited, which is why I'm happy to see that there are people like you who get it. If you allow them to be exploited, how long is it going to be until you get exploited?
Exactly. I mean, it's not, if we don't stand up for ourselves. I mean, sooner or later they're gonna do the same. What they're doing to them, they're gonna do it to us. I mean, they're gonna want us to pay for fuel, which is so expensive right now, especially here in California.
Yeah.
I mean, we're working for fuel. That's what we're doing. I don't know.
And how do you support your family when you're supporting ExxonMobil?
Oh wow, it's tough. It's tough, but I got to do it, you know. But it's it's real tough because $600 a week is not enough. Not enough to support, pay a house, pay a car payment, pay for the fuel for my car. I mean, it's real hard to live out of this.
Yeah, I mean, good luck taking your kid to a ball game or buying the kid a mitt or putting clothes on the kid, especially when you're talking about some of the things that we've been talking about. Let me ask you this. You know, you had the big the 40-hour strike, the events from Workers' Memorial Day on. What kind of response did you get from other people in the port? What kind of response did you get from the general public? And what kind of response did you get from your family?
You know what? I was happy that they were supporting us. They went out there. They support our fight and my family too. You know, even though there was 2 days out of work, you know, they were there. They say, you know, Dad, let's keep on going because we gotta win this. We can't be like this all the time. You know, the way we are right now it's pathetic. I mean, you can't do anything with this kind of thing.
Yeah, and not only are you trying to make conditions better for yourself, but you're trying to make conditions better for other workers, and oh, by the way, maybe for your children if they ever decide to do the same kind of job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're trying to. I've been a truck driver for 12 years, and now having the union backing us up, you know, and getting together. I mean, I see progress. I see that we're gonna win this. This is it's gonna take a while, yes, but we're there. We're gonna keep on fighting, and we're not gonna go nowhere. We're not gonna go nowhere until we win.
And that's the attitude that I got to be honest. I'm hoping that people are listening and taking this to heart because this is how the middle class was built. This is how my grandparents' generation, when they came back from fighting World War II, took to the streets here in the U.S. and said, we're fighting for decent wages, decent hours, decent conditions, and opportunity for ourselves and for our children and our grandchildren.
Yeah. You know, we're tired of getting everybody at work, they treat us different because we joined the union or we're active as union members. But you know, at work there's two teams, like they say, one's against and one is with the unions. And the ones that they're against the union, they're the ones that are getting the better jobs, more hours, and for us, they're cutting us the hours. They're doing us, you know, work harder for the same kind of money, you know.
Yeah, it's a crime, and it actually is illegal. And the good thing is you've got somebody who's got your back. And the idea is the longer you fight this, you're eventually going to win. As long as you stay together, that's the key. If they're able to divide and conquer and pit us again, because that's how they've won. That's how they've broken the middle class. That's how they've broken the American dream, by pitting us against one another and blaming each of us for, well, you got something I didn't, and they're robbing us blind.
Yeah. And that's why I'm telling you, there's two groups right here in our company, and then they get the better stuff because the company is with them. We get harassed, we get pushed by the other people, and companies is allowing this, that
they're encouraging it.
For them to start fights with us, so we could get fired, and we're there. I mean, we just wouldn't say anything. We know that companies is allowing them to do this, and but we're there fighting, and we're gonna stand there no matter what. We can't be like this forever.
Yeah.
We gotta change.
At the end of it, you're on the right side of this, and it's people like you with the courage to stand up and say no more that I give you the ultimate respect. And I think as a nation, we should be respecting folks like you, which is why the wealth class fears you. It's because you're willing to stand up and say no more. Yasser Casillo, I appreciate you taking time for us. I appreciate you sharing your story with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Great talking with you. Let's take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
To lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out. Where's our government? Lawsuits and arraignments. Members under company surveillance. Public divided. Either they love us or they hate us. Rocket billions off our backs. And it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our money. We work hard for respect. Keep fighting for these rights for generations. It's next. One day longer. One day longer. The people's
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thoughts are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
What's the matter with the post office? The U.S. Postal Service, I mean, the corporate hierarchy that runs this enormously popular public institution. Yes, I know that USPS has lost revenue it traditionally got from first-class mail delivery, but I also know that letter carriers and postal workers have offered many excellent ideas for expanding the services that USPS can deliver, thus increasing both revenue and the importance of maintaining these community treasures. Yet, the Postal Board of Governors, which includes corporate interests that would profit by killing the public service, seems intent on, guess what, killing it. The board's only idea is to cut services and shut down hundreds of local post offices. Incredibly, their list of closures include the historic post office in Philadelphia's Old City, the very building where Ben Franklin presided as our country's first Postmaster General, appointed by the Continental Congress in 1775. All across the country, post offices that are invaluable artistic and historic assets are slated to be sold to developers. One is the marvelous 1935 Bronx Post Office with classical architectural flourishes and 13 museum-worthy murals. It's not just a post office, says one customer fighting the closure. It's part of my life. No one feels that way about a FedEx warehouse. Yet, says a USPS spokeswoman dismissively, the four-story building is severely underused. This is Jim Hightower saying, so use it. Put a coffee shop in it, a public internet facility, a library and museum, a one-stop government services center, and, as USPS employees have suggested, a public bank offering basic services to the thousands of neighborhood people ignored by commercial banks. Come on, USPS, show a little creativity and gumption, and remember that service is a key part of your name.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by Ask Me Council 13.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Life in the fast lane, trouble that you use your mouth. Life in the fast lane.
Yes, life in the fast lane, especially if you're on the internets. The FCC, their commissioner, this Tom Wheeler, and we talked about this last week. He has said, he made the promise that he's not going to allow internet service providers to push most of people like me into the slow lane. No, he's not going to let that happen. Not going to let anyone make two internets. The one that people pay for, the big moneyed interests can pay for, and then the rest of us. And my response to that, healthy dose of skepticism. In fact, I don't even know if skepticism is the right word. My BS meter, through the roof. Now he claims that we're not going to have two internets, and that people that are prioritized aren't going to have faster access than everyone else. And I say BS, because at the end of the day, I'm looking at the internet because the moneyed interests understand that's the future. Everybody agrees that's the future. Terrestrial radio in my lifetime will be dead. And I hate to say that because I love radio. But the traditional stick in the air, airwaves kind of stuff, dead. Going to be dead. Because what they've done is they've put this little thing in our pockets that we pay for, these cell phones that are smartphones. And they've got internet access, they got all kinds of stuff. And oh, by the way, we can pick up whatever we want. I mean, we live in an amazing information era, like none other in the history of civilization. And in 10, 15 years, we're going to look backwards and go, how'd they get along with that meager technology? That's the kind of explosion we're living through right now. We are truly living in amazing times. So for me, this decision right now, it may not affect us in 6 months, it may not affect us in a year, but looking 5, 10, 20 years down the road, what my children and my grandchildren are going to have to live through, these are huge decisions. Just like any other legislative or court decision, this is something that will be lived with for years and years to come. You hear me talk on the program about the Fairness Doctrine and how Reagan let that go, and how Clinton, the Telecom Bill of '96, which allowed mass consolidation of radio and media, and how you can't go back to that. There's no way of going back to the good old days where one guy could own a station and actually compete in a market with these behemoths, because there were no behemoths. To me, this internet is important to be protected, because it's going to give people like you, people like me, access to message. And once you give the Koch brothers and the wealth class the ability to super speed their message, to supersize their ability, give them a larger platform on the future, we're screwing ourselves badly. And we're shutting out the democracy that can be what's on the internet. And if you don't believe me, that terrestrial is dead and internet is the future, explain to me why Clear Channel is pushing the iHeartRadio app so heavily. Why do they want you to turn off the radio? Why do they want you to turn it off in your car, put it on your phone, and plug it into your car? Why? Because they're training us. Just like anything else, just like the ATM machine, just like credit cards, whatever, they're feeding it to us, because they know eventually when the stick is dead, because you know how much it costs to run a radio station, put the stick in the air and all that? Once they've got you, they can then start charging you. And it's no longer then going to be just advertisers. It's going to be consumers paying for it as well. You don't think these people are rich for no reason. They've got this stuff all I'll figure it out. And at the end, it's about fleecing you and me. And it's about controlling the message, controlling what we hear. Oh, Rick, you sound conspiratorial. Tell me I'm wrong. It's that simple. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, ricksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast Stitcher on the smartphone while you still can, before they take it all over. Quick break, right back with Hour 3. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better. It's the Rick Smith Show on Country Gold Radio, WIOO Carlisle, and WEEO Shippensburg.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. A vote to raise the minimum wage is expected as soon as Wednesday in the U.S. Senate. Republicans in Congress, though, continue to successfully block an increase in the federal minimum wage. Currently at $7.25 an hour, Democrats want to raise it to $10.10 an hour by 2016. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that raising that minimum wage would help 16.5 million U.S. workers, but would also likely eliminate around 500,000 jobs. 21 U.S. states have minimum wages higher than the federal rate. In a video advocating raising the minimum wage posted online, retail worker Philip Morgan describes what it's like trying to get by on a minimum wage.
Half my money goes to rent, and I'm diabetic, so the next big chunk of my money goes to medicine. And then there's food and transportation, and I have nothing left. That's it.
The California Federation of Teachers is boycotting Staples to protest Postal Service privatization of retail mail service at the office supply store chain. The teachers won't buy any school supplies from Staples. The American Postal Workers Union requested the action. APWU sees the U.S. Postal Service deal with Staples as a privatization move that destroys good-paying union postal jobs. A coalition of 4 postal unions are banding together to fight the Staples deal and the loss of postal jobs and degradation of mail service the unions say goes along with privatization. A coalition of 14 Detroit public worker unions, including AFSCME, says an agreement reached with the city offers an opportunity for the unions to provide regular input and guidance to city managers over the next 5 years. The agreement covers 3,500 workers. Full details of the deal haven't yet been released. Public safety unions are not in the coalition. The police and fire unions in Detroit have yet to reach a new deal with the city as Detroit's bankruptcy proceeds in court. Ed McNeil, spokesman for the Coalition of Detroit Unions, says Detroit's emergency manager Kevin Orr is privatizing Detroit public services like garbage collection and water and sewer operations, even though privatization too often proves ineffective. The Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, and the Association of Professional Flight Attendants are in negotiations with the merged American Airlines. Talks will continue for 150 days in an effort to reach agreement on a joint new contract for 24,000 flight attendants. American has announced record profits. A new agreement is expected to be in place by 2015. Meanwhile, AFA-CWA has elected new leaders. Sarah Nelson is the new president of the union. Deborah Sutor was elected vice president. On Wednesday, the AFL-CIO will project a 90 by 60-foot anti-deportation piece of art onto its building in Washington, D.C. to highlight the deportation crisis impact on immigrant workers. The projection will contain the names and stories of deported immigrant workers. The AFL-CIO supports comprehensive immigration reform with a path to citizenship and an end to the deportations that rip apart immigrant worker families. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Rebels are we, though heavy our hearts shall always be. Ah, no ball or chain, no prison shall keep rid of rebels of the sacred heart. I said no ball or chain, no prison shall keep rid of rebels of the sacred heart.
And welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. A little labor history today. Back in the year of 1927, 109 miners were killed in an explosion in Everettville, West Virginia. Many of them were buried in unmarked graves because they couldn't recognize who they were. Story has it, again, one of those negligence of our corporate class who said, hey, we just got to run coal. All that safety stuff, unimportant. You just run the coal. And oddly enough, today, you look at the news, there was an oil explosion in West Texas. Killed 2 workers, injuring a number of other folks. 9 folks, I guess, were injured. And you go, here we are. All these years, people still going to work and not coming home at the end of the day, which leads me to go, how do we make our workplaces safer so that we don't have these situations happen, which is why we have asked Gail Bateson. She's executive director of WorkSafe. WorkSafe.org is their website. They've got a new report out on worker safety throughout the country. Gail, thanks for taking time for us.
Sure, glad to be part of the program.
You look at these reports and you see, the history of this country, people going to work and in large numbers dying. Maybe we don't see 109 people being killed in a single day, but we still got 5,000 people every year who die on the job.
Well, that's just on the safety side, the acute injuries. We've got another 50,000 that are dying slow death from exposure to coal dust, asbestos, occupational disease. Really, your odds are 10 times as great to be killed from one of a disease than an injury.
And we don't really keep very good records of those, do we?
No, we really don't.
Because when we did our labor history tour last summer, we went to the city of West Texas, where the fertilizer plant had this massive explosion, blew a hole in the ground 10 feet deep, 93 feet around. I think 14 people lost their lives because OSHA hadn't inspected this plant since I was in high school, and they were storing an illegal amount of ammonium nitrate in wooden boxes in a wooden building with no sprinkler system. To me, that was easily avoidable.
Right. Although they also had not informed OSHA that of what they had on their site, so there was no way OSHA could even know that it was the site that should have been prioritized for inspection.
Yeah, but here again, isn't this one of those moments where, as a nation, we say, there's a potential danger. We should be looking at places. We should be stacking our regulatory agencies with enough people to be able to go out and, I don't know, just take a look.
Right, and there should be consequences if they don't report what they have on site.
Yeah, no. Anybody going to jail yet? I've yet to see anyone going to jail in that.
Not on that one. It's too soon. It takes a really long time for these cases to work their way through.
You're the expert in this. Anyone gone to jail for someone dying on the job? Because I've said a number of times that if I really didn't like you and I wanted to kill you, I'd probably just hire you.
Yeah, there have been a few cases. There are not too many of them. Generally, the enforcement agencies like OSHA and Cal OSHA don't have that authority, so it has to be turned over to the local district attorneys to prosecute.
So on Monday, it was Workers' Memorial Day. I understand there were a number of events going on in California. Were you involved in any of them?
Sure, yeah. We had one in Northern California in Concord, which is in Contra Costa County, where all the refineries are, and our local central labor councils and a bunch of unions and worker advocacy groups came together. And we had a number of speakers, people who were family members of those who've been killed on the job, co-workers of people killed, many of whose stories we